the social challenges facing countries came under the spotlight when the UN Secretary-General António Guterres was addressing the SDGs Summit at the UN headquarters in New York ahead of the assembly. Countries have made commitments to honor their commitments in relation to the implementation of the SDGs. Let's now speak to SABC News International editor Sophie Mukwena. Sophie, thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's begin with the President making a statement on the critical issue of healthcare at the time where countries are still recovering from the COVID-19 impact. Let's take us through, in fact, what the President had to say.
Well, earlier on this morning, the President was addressing a gathering on the margins of the summit in relation to maternal health care and also the child support in terms of health issues. And the President spoke about how South Africa has made important milestones in terms of addressing the health challenges. You know, at some point in time, the country was struggling with the HIV and AIDS, and he pointed out in terms of how the policy had to change, and also they had to ensure that you have more people on the program, either as people who are taking treatment or people who are also receiving support system that is a comprehensive support for those who are affected and infected by HIV and AIDS. And also he pointed out, you know, that some few days ago there was a heated debate around the statement by the Minister of Finance in relation to implementation of NHI, where it looks like government is backtracking, and those who are in support of the NHI were very, very angry, and therefore at the global level or stage, the President made a firm commitment that NHI will be implemented. Let's take a listen at what he had to say.
We remain committed to implementing universal health care through the establishment of the National Health Insurance, which will have far-reaching benefits for the access to health services for women, children, and adolescents.
And this issue of access is quite a big one, but also during the SDG Summit, the UN Secretary-General also touching on the social challenges, and of course some critical points were made there.
Yes, indeed. The SG, his message has been very, very consistent and clear, starting with the G7 earlier this year, calling for the transformation of the multilateral institutions and also the Security Council, particularly the IMF and the World Bank. As you know, that for many years there has been that concern that these institutions are not helping the developing countries, and therefore he did the same when he was here during the BRICS Summit. He did the same at the Climate Summit in Kenya, at the G20 in India, and recently at the G77 in Brazil. Let's take a listen at what he had to say, because these issues lead to poverty and unemployment because countries can't afford.
It is an indictment of every one of us that millions of people are starving in this day and age. Building on July's Food System Summit stocktake, we are marshalling finance, science, data, innovations and policy and governance support to help countries transform food systems so all people can access a healthy and nutritious diet.
And also some of the issues that are raised by developing countries there when it comes to financing and how it's going to also play a critical role when it comes to implementing these SDGs. What can we expect later today? Because we know for them it's still 6 hours behind, as well as tomorrow.
Well, we expect the President to address a Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, with a huge delegation of business from South Africa. You know that there has been a challenge in terms of South Africa-U.S. relations, particularly on trade. You'd recall when there was that announcement by the ambassador of the U.S. in South Africa in relation to Lady R. There was that capital flight in South Africa, and some people thinking whether is it still wise to invest in South Africa because you know that Russia is under the US sanction and the West. And therefore, people thinking that now if you find a situation where South Africa can suffer secondary sanctions or they can be caught in a crossfire with this relationship with Russia, the businesses will suffer. And I think this will be an important moment for the president to set the record straight in terms of South Africa's interest in relation to trade and investment worldwide, not only with the Americans. And also, I think the issue of AGOA will come under spotlight in terms of South Africa hosting this important gathering on behalf of Africa next month. And those will be key issues today. Tomorrow, the General Assembly will hear the statements. And I think what's going to dominate the talks will be peace and security, with Zelensky being there. And on the other hand, you find that the top countries like China, Russia, India, France, UK, the nuclear powers, but also countries that are part of the permanent five, their leaders are not there. And therefore the question is the Secretary General vindicated António Guterres, because he has warned that it looks like the world is drifting apart?